Welcome to Build Out Brief. This is Jim Kunkel, and I so appreciate your support of the Build Out live stream that broadcasts each Wednesday at noon Eastern Daylight Time. The live stream that you're watching right now will be starting in just 1 minute. Let me take this opportunity to talk about Build Out Brief. This content series is a result of viewers like you who overwhelmingly requested that I add a supplemental series to Build Out that centers on professional business topics, is more focused, and global on guests. If you're thinking about starting a live stream, then StreamYard is a platform for you. It's what I use to build you Build Out Brief. After the stream, see the comment or the description section for my special savings referral link. Now, when it comes to having a professional live stream and winning over viewers, you need to make sure that your graphics and supporting promotional items are the best. All of the creative content for Build Out and Build Out Brief are designed and produced with Canva. You should check out Canva. See the comment or description section for my special Canva referral link. Welcome to Build Out Brief. I'm Jim Kunkel. Joining me this evening is Kat Johnson. Kat, welcome.
Hey guys, welcome. Thank you.
Hey, really appreciate having you. Kat, before we get into our conversation regarding humanizing your content and specifically focusing on branding, can you provide a professional background on you, what you do, and also some of the work that you provide to professionals out there?
Yeah, definitely. So for many, many years, I worked in record stores. And at some point I reached out and reached out to our weekly publication and asked about doing some music writing. So I started doing that, got into writing, loved it immediately. I was amazed that people would pay me to write about what I loved. So kept doing that, doing more arts and culture writing, eventually started writing about community more. That led to writing about co-working, and that's where I absolutely fell in love. This was probably 10 years ago now. And the whole co-working industry of shared office space, co-working communities, people working in the same space really, really appealed to me. This is back when it was a movement. Now it's this global industry that's just massive and poised for great things. But so I started writing about co-working and then realized that I wanted to be on the inside of this movement. So I started helping co-working space operators with their marketing. And that just kind of bloomed into this. There's a great question, like, what can you be the best in the world at? It's like, can I be the best marketer in the world? No. Can I be the best content marketer in the world? No. Could I be the best content strategist in co-working? I was like, I think I might be able to do that. So I just niched down completely, focused on serving co-working space operators. There were a lot of spaces, but I didn't see a lot of great marketing. So I just started helping them with their content creation, their strategy, how they think about differentiating their space and building community. And there's just a whole ecosystem there within co-working. And that is my sweet spot. It's like my passion for community and people and entrepreneurialism and life by design, all kind of comes together in my work. So I work a lot with co-working space operators. I run a monthly virtual event called Co-working Convos, and I have a membership group called The Lab that's full of some amazing operators from around the world. Also blog and create videos when they force me to. And it's grown into a whole ecosystem. And so now I'm well established in co-working. People know me as the content person. And now I'm starting to kind of push against the barriers of that niche and expand into other things like purpose-driven work, underappreciated and underrepresented, helping people with their content. I'm really super into LinkedIn. At the beginning of this year, I decided to go all in on it. And I just can't believe the connections, the results, the different partnerships that have come from LinkedIn. And here I am. So I'm pushing a little bit at the bounds and doing more with content strategy in general, but specifically the thing that lights me up is working with people who have some purpose, some intention, want to do storytelling, want to do kind of real talk about their brand.
Yeah, I was so fascinated when you and I became introduced to each other through LinkedIn, and I really started looking into what you do in this movement related to co-working. And now that hopefully we're coming out of a global pandemic,
Yeah.
has that intensified the co-working movement?
So co-working struggled during the pandemic, but it's poised for amazing things. So this whole transition to remote work, the way that the industry at large talks about it, is that this accelerated the remote evolution by 10 years, right? Like we were here, and then 2 years later, we're in a completely different place where the remote model is proven. People are leaving jobs that don't offer remote options. Companies are using remote options as an incentive. The office is now becoming the place where you go to collaborate, not to do your 9 to 5 work. Yeah, it's co-working is really nicely positioned right now. Shared workspace is in a really good place. We just have to get through this like last little tail, hopefully. But already space operators are seeing a ton of demand, and teams are calling co-working spaces and saying, we have 20 people, can you get us in? So there are some new challenges that are coming with it, like navigating some of that territory. But yeah, co-working's in a really good place.
Yeah, it just seems to be, and it's an amazing movement. And the more I read into it, the more I learn about it. It just so fits the future of business. So I think you and I could probably have a separate stream just on the co-working, and maybe that's an
Oh yeah.
idea we do for next year.
Yeah, and I have a couple thousand friends who would love to join us and talk about co-working.
Excellent. Maybe we could do a panel, a group
Yeah,
panel type of
let's do
conversation.
it.
So let's move into talk about how to humanize brands, and we're looking at with brands. Obviously, you have content and engagement that you're trying to do, you know. And I also think that if this topic we're covering this evening is also one of these topics that we could talk forever about as well. What does it mean by humanizing brands?
So, big picture, I think this transition has happened where it used to be companies would kind of broadcast from on high. You didn't really care who was behind IBM or Nike or whatever. Like you maybe like with Nike, you maybe knew a bit of the origin story, but you weren't really concerned with like brand values and mission and the team and how they treated their employees and things like that. And now it's like, oh, you're going to get left behind if you're not surfacing those things and making them really easy to find. And with all the social media channels, it's not working anymore for brands to just kind of be a top-down voice from on high, right? We really want to know like who the people are behind it. So from just a practical business point of view, you have to start sharing some more of that. People want to hear from the CEO and not just like an annual report. They want to be like, who is this person? What are they about? And then from a human perspective, it's just how we connect. Like it accelerates and makes everything so much better when we're willing to show up as ourselves and let that kind of lead our brand, where people can connect with us as humans. And that's the kind of stuff, it just lights me up. And that's where like the co-working, storytelling, content thing just syncs really nicely in that overlap for me.
Yeah, I remember back in the 90s, I worked for a division of Westinghouse. And for the most part, with Westinghouse, that brand, it didn't matter what the product sold because it was Westinghouse. Today's business environment, the world we work in today globally, the brand is not about selling products, it's about telling stories. And we see a lot of that on television, or if we're looking at YouTube videos and we see ads from companies. They focus on telling stories. Why is it so critical today for the storytelling to really help support and grow a brand?
Some of that is to surface the brand mission, the brand values, things like that. I think it also gives brands an opportunity to not be product focused, but to create these brand ecosystems, brand communities. I talk
Mhm.
about that a lot, where the products, they can make different products that are timely and relevant, what people need at that time, but the core brand doesn't have to change at all. Like if all those values are in place, like Apple's the obvious example, right? Simon Sinek talks about this in his super famous talk about having your why at the middle of your circle, and then the products can change. You can do different things. I would take it even one step further and say, stick your community at the middle of that. And like in my work, I have this group of space operators around the world, and my job is to serve and serve and serve and serve and serve them. And sometimes that looks like virtual events. Sometimes that looks like blog posts. Sometimes that looks like videos. Next year, we might be doing something completely different, right? But that's my core group. And I think that using stories, like the reason people know, like, and trust me is because I'm open about who I am. I share about my life. I invite people in. I try to be accessible. And I think that it may not work for Westinghouse, although I would nudge them in that direction, right? Like to be as human as possible, but especially for smaller brands, solopreneurs, like that, understanding that core group and then doing storytelling for and with them is just gold.
Well, and I think that, we're talking about mega companies, you're talking about a Westinghouse or a General Electric. In today's environment and with the media that's available, social media, content, platforms, there can be an equalization when it comes to branding. And if you have the right message, the right stories, the right community, as you said, you're building, that really can take a small and a medium-sized company and accelerate their growth. When we're looking at social media, the goal is to, focus on building the relationships. How critical is social media in developing relationships? And to your point, I think communities as well.
It's an overload of riches, right? Like we have so many choices and so many options. The reality is that we're all media companies in addition to doing whatever we do. I think that's a good place to do it. And especially like with reels and things like that prioritize in real life stuff, that want to see the faces behind the brand. I think it's a really valuable way to do that. So I'd say it's a huge part of the storytelling.
I do gravitate around a lot of the branding, social media, and the marketing that's done that tells the story. It really promotes the product, a service, or whatever the brand is by telling a story. And sometimes the story might not be directly related to the product itself, but it just really helps kind of show a connection, a human connection. And to your point earlier too, and that aspect of community, and it builds that branding around a community. You had mentioned Apple. When I look at Apple, I think of ecosystem. For the most part, everything I have is Apple, and it just flows together, works together. And then also too, there is a community aspects. How I utilize Apple, there is part of a community that I'm involved with as well. So when we're looking at social media, we want to utilize video. The thing that a question that I get asked a lot of times related to social media posting, not to say that I'm a big social media influencer, is how can is humor acceptable, and when and how can you use humor in social media? Do you have any advice on that?
I mean, I like to laugh, and I like people that I think it's good to not take ourselves too seriously. But Jim, I want to backtrack if we can to something you said a minute ago about connecting with people. I was debating, kind of thinking about what we might talk about. I was debating sharing this story, but I think it's relevant, so I will. Years ago, in terms of letting people connect with us, years ago, I have a podcast. It's been dormant for a little bit, but I was going through, I was in a period of grief. Like I had lost a few people very close to me in a short amount of time. And it was the day to record a podcast. So I flipped on the Mike did the podcast. I was talking about SEO or something, but the reality of the situation was I was completely overwhelmed with real life, but I was sitting there talking about SEO tips. And I got off the podcast, finished recording, and I just thought, this is the exact opposite of what I'm coaching people to do. Like, I'm pretending like nothing's going on. So I hit record and I just started talking about what was going on for me. And it turned out really raw and real, and I really debated sharing it. I was like, not at all sure I wanted to share it. So I asked some friends, and people had mixed feelings about it. I ended up, after like a week, I did share it. And far and away, I got the biggest, most heartfelt, intense response of anything I had ever created. I'd been writing now at this point for years. I'd been a guest on podcasts. I'd been doing videos, a ton of things. People absolutely overwhelmed me. And what they said was, let me tell you about the time that my brother died by suicide. Let me tell you about this. Let me tell you about that. Let me tell you about the time I lost both my parents. Like, they showed up in it gives me chills remembering that. I haven't talked about it in a while. They showed up so real because I showed up so real. And unlike anything I had done up to that point. And it was like, I can look back on my career. There's the before that and the after that. It's like, oh, I see. When I'm brave enough to show up, people meet me in that space. And that's a lot to ask of a brand, but like, looking in that direction, I think, is a good thing, because that's what we're so hungry for connection. We're so hungry to have real talk, even with social. Like, a lot of it's so kind of canned, and the influencer thing, like Influencers in the Wild, is one of my favorite Instagram things. If you haven't seen it, it's hilarious. So I just wanted to circle back on that about the being willing to show up real.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's a moving story, and it goes to a point that I'm going to bring up right now. And it's, for example, this live streaming that I do, the content I've been doing for the last couple of years. I'm building a community. I have a lot of friends, and I have a lot of great connections, and a lot of them are here this evening watching both of us have this conversation. And I love this aspect. It's a human aspect. It's a touch point, but we're sharing information. We're sharing a lot of knowledge and experience. And so what I want to say to you next is, you had a podcast, and I would highly encourage you, Kat, to look into maybe getting into broadcasting again, because, in the time that I've known you, you have a lot of amazing information. And I think that will help build a community even greater for you if let's get you out there,
Thank you, Jim. That means so much. And I need to revitalize the podcast. I also need to do more video. The excuse I give myself is it's a bandwidth issue, and I don't have an editor, and this and that and the other. But the reality is I could do it and should do it. So thank you for that nudge.
You can do it. I can hold down a full-time job and do my own editing and doing my own production. Once you get a system in place, a process in place, it's really not. It comes down to passion. That's what I really definitely say. It comes down to passion. So, when we're talking about branding and humanizing branding, one element that's critical for companies and organizations is their employees, their staff. They need to be part of that branding story. How are some of the ways that employees can become part of that branding process and humanizing branding?
I'm having a couple thoughts competing right now. One of them is it's a hot topic on LinkedIn right now. Like, we see that brands like Shield, that all their employees are creating amazing content, that it only accelerates and surfaces and strengthens that whole brand. So I think part of it is, and so the question becomes, how, as a leader, do you get and encourage and inspire people to be creating rich content on LinkedIn? I think that's an ongoing conversation, and elsewhere. Another piece of that is, this is something we talk about a lot in Coworking, is you have your external newsletter and email list, but also having an internal newsletter that doesn't go anywhere. It's just like a community thing. You can be a little cheeky, you can be like inside jokes. It just helps people, and it's a lightweight way to do it. I'm not saying that community building is done with a newsletter, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And sharing the stories of people within that. So even someone who's, if you have 100 or 1,000 employees, even someone departments away can see a connection between themselves and Sally or Roger or whatever. I think thinking about internal content is important also.
Excellent. Let's move on to talking about building your brand community. You might find this hard to believe, but I am over 21 years old. And I have the luxury of knowing the time before. In the old acquisition method, when it came to getting clients and customers, was pretty mechanical. It was very analog. Today's environment is so different with digital, social media, look, even TikTok. We were talking a little bit about that earlier, and you've got all these different platforms competing. You've got the YouTube, you've got LinkedIn really making a big, strong push into content and really welcoming creators and streamers and everything like that. When we're looking at the traditional methods, they're falling short. So now we're transitioning. Digital transformation is accelerating. What are some of the ways when for you recommend to build brand communities? What are some of the methods that should be done?
So this is one of my favorite topics, and it's one I know well because this is what I've been doing now for years as I've been building this Cat Johnson Co. ecosystems, helping co-working space operators. And I've learned a lot along the way. One of the things is something I mentioned before, like making sure that your community's at the heart of it, because your products and services and team will change. But if you have those people at it, like my friend Amy told me something a couple months ago. I said, I'm thinking of doing more, working with more people on LinkedIn or doing more around purpose and things like that. And she said, Kat, we'll follow you anywhere. And I would say that, especially for, people, entrepreneurs, smaller brands, that's what we're going for, right? That we can evolve and change our offerings and stay relevant to this community we serve, and that they're going to stay with us. So in terms of tactics, I think the most important thing about building a brand community rather than a brand audience is providing ways for those people to connect with each other. Like I have a membership group called The Lab, and someone posted in the Slack one time, like a year and a half ago or something, they're like, Kat has completely lost control of The Lab. And it was like the best thing ever because they were all connecting and they set up accountability partnerships and they share resources and do all these things. And I'm always watching from the side and I chime in as needed and to stay part of things. But the community is a community without me, right? Like I'm kind of there as the ringleader or something. But it's been really important to me to provide ways for them to connect. So we do that through Slack, but we also have like really lightweight things like we do. Laura's in the lab. Hi, Laura. We do weekly work sprints, which it's a good way to get things done. Like we take an hour and just do 2 25-minute sprints, but it's also a way that we can just get to know each other and be like, what's going on in your space? What's going on? And just kind of have that really lightweight human connection. So I feel like that's the key. It's not just putting yourself at the center and building an audience around you. It's helping those people connect with each other. That's when it just supercharges itself.
Yeah, the lab sounds so amazing, so interesting. And I'm probably going to want to do a deeper dive into the lab. In some of the research that I had done, I came across an article and I was talking about, crowdsourcing, customers and clients. And, I understand it kind of on a higher level, but is there any more additional information you could provide when we're talking about crowdsourcing customers and clients?
Will you say more about that? I'm not sure what you mean. I've not thought of that.
When you're looking at it, you're reaching out to the larger community that follows the brand, and what the community will do is provide you a lot of feedback, recommendations, and companies need to be really mindful that their job is not just to push out information and focus on the branding by getting content and material and all that type of information out there. So let's say they build a community, it's a one-way community. They're basically pushing to the community. You have that push and pull community. And so you want to rely on, and what's nice about it is if you crowdsource it, you're spreading this out over a wider area, let's say, of getting information back. There's more data points. And that could really help you find small micro trends that could become bigger trends and help a company become a little bit more nimble, flexible, or go through a reinvention. How about that? That would be, I think, a word that I would throw out there. So I think it ties back to your community aspect of, how critical a community would be for providing the information feedback, a loop back into the company.
Yeah, and I'm really fortunate because the global co-working community is really generous and close-knit, connected. They'll share resources with their competitor. Like, it's really unlike anything that I've seen before. So there are different Facebook groups, there are different things. I said I run co-working convos once a month. So we have these things where people ask questions into the community. So those definitely, I track those to see, like, is there a workshop I should do on this? Is this a blog post? So I'm kind of constantly getting feedback from the community by the questions that are asked on these more public platforms, my own. And then also, there are plenty of amazing things in co-working. So in that way, I definitely pull from the crowd. A lot of people I know, but I love when I learn something from someone I haven't connected with and can kind of make a connection that way. And then I also rely on space operators to tell other space operators about what we're doing. Have like a little campaign coming up in December where we're doing a promo, and into the lab first, I let people know, like, we're going to be doing this first month free. If you guys know somebody who should be here with us, here's a sneak peek for the code. So I definitely, like, word of mouth, as we know, is the best thing that can happen for your marketing. A trusted operator telling another operator that they should come to something I'm doing, they take that very seriously. So I rely on people doing that, and I can ask occasionally, but what I try to focus on is just staying in service mindset and making it where it's a no-brainer, where people are like, you have to come to the convo. You're going to love it. So it really comes down to creating that relevant, valuable, timely content.
Yeah, I think it adds to the impactfulness of it. Also, when you tie in some urgency to it, for the most part, everyone wants to help others. And when you're part of a community, you want to help that community out. So that makes so much sense. Let's move on. We'll move on to our final topic for this evening, and that's dealing with marketing your brand to achieve brand goals and key performance indicators. When we're talking about brand identity and image goals, what do they typically look like?
I feel like it's simpler than the world would have you believe. I feel like it's knowing who you serve, how you serve them, and then aligning that with your marketing so that as you serve them, then you provide them the next obvious step, whether it's reading another post or downloading something or purchasing, if you're into, if what you do is products, or scheduling a free call. Like, there are a million different options, but I feel like the key thing is just getting that alignment straight. And it asks some challenging questions about who you are, what you're doing, and what you want to be doing. And it seems really obvious. We all put together a business plan or whatever, but there's kind of a deeper piece there of making sure that you know very clearly who you serve, and that what you're offering is such a tight fit for them that it becomes just the obvious solution. So yeah, I get lost in the weeds with marketing, as we all do. Like, I like to nerd out on all the latest things and projections and all that. But I feel like it's pretty simple. Marketing at its essence is understanding who you serve and how you serve them. And then with co-working, as this industry just explodes, it's getting increasingly important to differentiate, right? Like, it used to be a town had a co-working space, maybe. And now it's like you might be in a town with 100 co-working spaces, and that's only going to keep growing. So then the question becomes like, do you serve startups or social good organizations? Do you want to focus on remote workers? Do you want to focus on people like financial planners that are mostly going to stay in their office and do their thing? Like, there's plenty of room. This is what co-working's been saying forever. There's plenty of room for everyone. Like, there's something Steve King from Emergent Research said years ago. He said, you can't build them fast enough for the growth that's coming. And this was years before the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, don't worry. And I think this goes for every industry. This is my industry that I know well, but I think it's a good practice of like, don't get caught up in competing with everyone. It's like, do what you do really, really well and make it very clear who you serve. Because as we know, it's not everyone. So the more clear you are about who's a great fit for your space, product, service, whatever, the easier it becomes to market to them and find them, and they see themselves in your storytelling, in your marketing. It's that if you kind of crop dust everyone hoping that it resonates with someone, it doesn't land with anyone. But if I say, like, you 10 people out of this crowd of 100, you're going to love what we're doing. Come check this out. There's 10 people who just brought into my brand community.
And that's what technology really does provide us today. It was different in the past where you just basically had print and you had audio. Let's say if someone was listening to the listening to the radio, or audio visual if they're watching a television, or maybe they go to a movie. And then you had video come out where you could play it on video players at home. And today everything's so digital and you can micro target. But back to the aspect of the branding when it comes to the goals, for me, the big thing is creating that brand awareness and brand loyalty. And you want to continuously monitor how that is working for you. And that's pretty much the KPI that I typically would look at. Really looking at our conversation this evening and also talking about the communities. Is there anything that we didn't cover, Kat, that you would want to leave before we would end this broadcast tonight?
Something you just said. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
a creative spirit. I tend to be like up in the clouds with all the ideas. I'm a triple air sign, if that means anything to anyone. So it's really easy for me to ideate and connect and do the things. But one of the things that was really valuable a couple of years ago, I brought in a teammate to help me with the data and the metrics and the tracking. And I think there's a risk of over depending on data,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been really helpful to see like be able to better target like what's working, where should we be spending our time and energy. Like Twitter and Facebook, we're kind of just moving off the map because there's just not a lot happening there. But LinkedIn and Instagram, we're kind of going all in on. So it's been a good balance to have that kind of groundedness with the data and keeping me on track with operations and things, so that I can go and do what I like to do and create and write and do things like this with you, Jim, and just grow my community and hobnob and make connections with people while also having that kind of anchor. So I would say if you're not inclined toward that kind of data groundedness, find someone to help you. And if you're super data oriented, you might need to loosen that up a bit and get some creatives to help you breathe some life into it. I think that you can kill a brand by only following the data. It's like, if you're not making connections, and just following spreadsheets, I think there's a real risk there also, especially as we move into this new future we're moving into, where there's an expectation that brands will be connected and transparent and open, and that we'll know who the team is and what they stand for.
Yeah, we are definitely moving into some exciting territory. And this is an opportunity for, you are doing amazing things in that space, but also for the next generation to get involved and really focus on what future branding looks like and building communities and other type of platforms that might be out there. Kat, how can people follow you? Do you have any type of social media, website, YouTube?
So Instagram and LinkedIn are my two favorites. Instagram, Kat Johnson Co. LinkedIn, you can just find me. We have a brand page, but that's mostly for co-working space operators. But please do connect with me, just Kat Johnson. I'm loving LinkedIn these days and trying to post 6 days a week to just kind of see. Like I said, I'm going all in on it. My website is katjohnson.co. And you can always email me. Also, you'll find a contact on my website there, but I'm happy to connect with anyone, and I can talk about this stuff all day.
Yeah, connect with Kat on LinkedIn, and hopefully soon you'll have a LinkedIn live stream and talk about community and other things. So really looking forward. Let's see.
Jim, I love it.
MJ, great point to put your energy where your strengths are. Definitely. Kat, thank you so much. I so greatly appreciate this opportunity, and hopefully you and I can have another broadcast or two going into 2022. It's hard to believe.
It's hard to believe. Jim, I appreciate you taking the time. This is a fun connection, and it's been great to talk about all this. So thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Excellent. Have a good rest of your night, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.